And here we go with the Business Not As Usual podcast. Vince and Mike coming at you for another episode where we are going to explore some really interesting stuff today, and mainly just for me. But before we get into it, Michael, welcome, and how are you?
I'm fantastic, Vince. Glad to be back. Glad to get back at the show this week.
It has been a while since we've been able to do this, and I immediately defaulted back into my the other show that I do, Analysts After Work, where I welcomed you. This is your show too, but welcome to the show, Michael.
Well, I thank you.
This is also yours. So
yes, I thank you. Now we're going to go into detail about something today, Vince.
We are going to go. So I have been in the process. Pun not intended, but I'm going to take it. I've been in the process of developing a lot of new training material, course material for my online academy, Love the Process Academy, and I have been really dialed into business process, and not from a okay, well, this is how you make a map, and this is how you It's not that. It's all of the things around implementing and adopting process thinking. What are the ingredients of a business process? Like, what are the pieces that you need? The life cycle of business process, the ins and outs of modeling, and then how do you decide what type of process improvement that you need? So are you going the tweak route of just continuous improvement? Are you going the redesign, which is taking an existing process and really tearing it down and rebuilding it? Or are you designing process that are net new? And this is commonly called greenfield process. There is nothing, and you can design it the best way. So I thought we would do a Vince episode and talk all about process.
I hope people have their pens ready. That we're gonna go deep today. We're gonna go deep.
This is gonna be really tactical.
Peoples.
Yeah, this is gonna be really tactical. I mean, as tactical as we can get in a 30-minute podcast.
Right.
I don't, I'm not gonna. But again, it's not gonna be, well, this is how you set up your swim lanes, and this is. So let's actually talk about that. So the first thing, the truth is, and this is something that I say a lot. The reason I say, process rules the world is because if you think about it, everything can be boiled down to a process. And what is a process, you might want to ask?
I was going to ask that, so go ahead. What is a process?
It is a logical, sequential series of steps. And that's it. So if you think about it, everything is a process. And we can turn this into like a Seinfeld thing. Like, what'd you do this morning? I woke up. Okay, great. That's a show.
That's a process.
That's a process, right? I woke up. Well, what are the steps involved in waking up? Well, I open my eyes, then I grab my phone, then I check my email, then I get up. So it's everything is a process. So I would strongly encourage everybody to get a deeper understanding of process, because it is truly everywhere.
So I'll just say this about the process, and this is where people get messed up. If you're like the owner of a business unit, or you have a certain process that you're responsible for, but think of the process through the customer lens. And so don't just take your process in your business unit as Vince's definition. It's the entire process, because if you do something that then creates issues upstream and downstream in that process, it's not just your process, it's the company-wide process. So make sure you remember that.
Yeah. Because otherwise you end up in situations where people have in different processes across different teams, which creates variation. And I don't need to go down the road of, variation is bad. Variation. I do this trick when
No,
I'm teaching Six Sigma. I do this
variation is bad.
this trick where where I'm talking about variation, and I get into, true or like, you tell me, is variation in business good or bad? And you always get that, well, it depends. I mean, I think it's good, right? Like, if I go into Starbucks, I want to be able to get a different type of coffee, and so that variation is good. And I have to say, no. Variation is always bad. What you're talking about is variety. When I go into a Starbucks, I would like a variety from which to choose from. But if I choose, if I go with an Americano, I don't want it to be completely the opposite of what I ordered last week.
And also the process is the same.
Correct.
Like
potentially. I mean, yeah. Oh, yes. From that perspective. No. For that perspective, you're right.
An Americano with sugar is the same as I want this thing with a list of 17 ingredients. You do the order, they flip the coffee, put the ticket on it. It goes to the person that does it. Now, the fact that they're putting 18 things in your coffee, it's still part of their process.
Correct.
And then they put the thing on the counter. The process is the same.
Correct.
You just have a different drink than I do. But
correct.
That is not a variation in process.
Correct.
Be clear about that.
And this is what I'm saying. It's not about it's about variation is bad. Variety is good. Unless you go to one of those restaurants that like has everything and then they do nothing well. You know what I mean? You know those places, right? You can have noodles, you can have pasta, you can have a burger. I want to go to 3 different places for those. Right. You know what I mean? So
here's where the variation doesn't work. And I'm not going to get into the whole story. You can go look it up. There's a story that I like to tell about Joshy the giraffe. It was this kid's toy. He left it at a hotel. They did a bunch of stuff, took pictures, and then, because he forgot it at the hotel, and then they overnighted it to him with it was like a whole thing. Go read the story. And when business leaders looked at that, they were like, there's so much variation in that. It's impossible for us to give that level of experience. But when you actually went to the customer, they're like, yeah, I don't really need that level of variation. What I need is a process that I know is repeatable. It's the same every time. That's a nice thing, but you need to do the base level well before you start doing variation. So again, that's what I'm saying. The process needs to be for your customer the same across the whole organization. If there's so much variation in your process, your experience is going to be bad.
Correct.
There's a direct tie to that.
Yeah. And the Joshy the giraffe, I want to just second this one. The Joshy the giraffe story, I've heard it a couple times. It is fantastic. I would say that the process of that organization allowed that to happen, and it left space for that, surprise and delight, that creating that experience. But without the process in place that governs, the check-in process, the checkout process, they were handling that as an exception, but they did it in a really, really sort of touching way. Yes. Go check that out. All right. So this is starting us down this road of process thinking. It's getting us thinking like everything is a system of activities, a system of tasks. I visualize, almost like the Matrix, I visualize things in a sequence of ordered events.
So
which is sad. Sorry.
But is that process thinking, or is that systems thinking, or are you equating them as the same thing?
I mean, what's the difference? If you think about it,
I'm asking you the question.
What I'm saying, a systems thinking is really just a sequence of events that happen through, some sort of platform,
right?
From one system to another. So if you wanted to draw a distinction, you could say that systems thinking is like the IT side versus process thinking, which is the business side.
Right.
Now, inevitably in 2021 and beyond, those two things really need to be the same thing. So I don't know that you would want to draw a distinction between them, but if you had to, that's how I would do it. One thing I get asked a lot, and I do this as part of my my training here, is around like process levels, because you always hear these like process levels, and level one, is that a level one or is that a level two? Like,
oh, the fable. Yes. How far are we going? Level 5?
Yeah. So
I mean, never know what that means.
That's called a process hierarchy.
Right.
Okay. So typically, and this is the way that I do it, and this is the way that you know a lot of people sort of commonly do it. And it helps to stop that, you know, that debate over, well, what level is this?
Oh, okay, good.
I like to think of it, you know, align the levels to your organization. So at a level 0, it is like the highest level. So let's continue. You know what? Let's use Disney. I want to use Disney. You arrive at the park. You have your day. You go home.
Well, that's the level I like to work at.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's fine. But it's sort of hard.
That's pretty high level. Is that actually really a level? That's pretty high level.
That's level 0. That's, I mean, well, level zero gives you sort of the big buckets of where things are happening, but there's not a lot of tangible meat there. You can't do a lot with that. Then you want to drill down, right? And you start going through in business analysis. This is commonly used in requirements. But you can also use it for process as well. This concept of progressive elaboration. So I'm going to now take that first step, arrive at park. Well, I'm going to start to break that down. So now we're going to the level of, you know, a department within an organization. So if the CEO, and maybe this is where your thinking is, Mike, you want to become the CEO one day, like you're going to think at that very, very high level. You can't get to, now you probably want to drill down a little bit more and understand the sub-levels. The next level down would be like your vice presidents. So they would have a deeper understanding of each of those different buckets of work, and you're going to start to see almost like an org chart of process steps. Right? So now we're going to say, like, at the VP level. At the level 2, so that's level 1. At the level 2, now we're getting into like divisions. So you've got, you know, typically like directors or that or the equivalent. That would be at a level 2 process. Then you would go down to level 3, which is like management.
Manager.
Right? And then you go down further, and now you're at the task level. So level 4 is really as far as you really need to go to get, you know, tactical. But that is at like the task level. So what specifically is happening along the way? It's very, very detailed. Now you can go one step further. We get into the sub-task level. It's
that's like the fabled level 5 that no one ever gets to. But
I mean, so
everyone wants to aspire to that. Yeah, I don't think I've ever got to it.
I always say whether I'm, you know, training or consulting or whatever, it's like get to the level that's going to make it actionable for you. Don't say, we need level 3 processes across the board, because I might be able to take action with what I learned from level 1 and 2. So why am I going to go through the effort of documenting? Right?
So I think that at the management level, I get what you're saying. At the, you know, the people that actually do the work, I think when that isn't documented or that's not laid out, and they can see the big picture, and they can see like what they're supposed to do at a very task-oriented level, and then the other ones, that's where you run into actual variation to the people doing the work. So if you don't get to that level, I think that's where like the wheels come off.
Great.
But it's very hard to get to that level.
Great comment, Mike. And I agree with you. And this is where it's important to be able to categorize your processes, because not all of them are equal. So you have core processes, which are critical to your business, critical to your mission. You have support processes that enable those core processes to happen. And then you have management processes of like, how do you manage data? How do you run reports? How do you produce report? Like all the stuff that makes the governance of, but at the end, it's those core processes that need to be documented to a more detailed level, because that is where the work is really happening. So it depends, right? You could say within our organization, for all core processes, we're going to go to level 4. For support, we're going to go to level 3, and for management, we're going to go to level 2. You could do that, right? And it's just a way of making the work easier and ensuring that you're not working for the sake of working. Because I may not need a detailed process of how to produce a report, but I need to know where to go, and I need to know that I can, select my filters or whatever. I don't need to have first move your mouse to the top right corner, click this button. I may not. I might be giving people too much credit, but I may not.
So I have a question about process. Let's say we get to these levels. Is it natural, or is it once you have them, are those locked in? Should you be doing those day after day, year after year, or is there constant tweaking to them always?
Mike, you're on fire with the questions today. So what I will say is all processes should at the very least be reviewed for currency and for opportunities for improvement. But you should not enable anybody to make any change that they want whenever they want. So to me, once those processes are documented and are operationalized, that's the process. It must be followed. Right. If there's a better way, and this is where people like the people that are on the front line that are actually doing the process are really, really helpful, because they don't want to work any harder than they need to. So nor should they. So if they find a better way of doing something, they shouldn't be punished. They shouldn't, but they also shouldn't do it. Variation. But then what I want to do is, if they've found a better way, if they have built a better mousetrap, then let's make sure that that's part of the process and communicate that out so that it's now everybody's doing it, and not just, Jimmy, the one, customer service rep who's amazing and everybody loves. Well, let's figure out what Jimmy's doing and make it the standard. So there should only be one best way of doing anything.
Well,
it should be reviewed. Yeah.
You make it the standard, documented, and that's now the new process.
Correct.
But you can't have constant churn on business process. No. You can review it, and you've lived with it for a bit, and there could be an iteration on it, but there has to be gated iterations with governance to that.
Correct.
Individual business units, and this is why I keep coming back to this, just can't keep changing the process, because it then affects the overall experience.
Right. Oh, I thought that you had more to say there. Yeah,
I'm done.
You're done.
Mic drop.
That. I mean, yes, mic drop. You can't just make changes constantly, because then you're trying to operate against a moving target.
Right.
Oh, are you doing the Jimmy, you did this wrong. Well, I was just following the process. Oh, that was updated 2 days ago. Well, who did it? Susie. Well, Susie didn't say anything, and so you have to go through. Think of your process like a product and run it that way.
Yes.
Right? You can
100%.
You can make the changes. But you have to ensure that it is communicated, that it is documented, that it adds value. And this is where I see a lot of companies and individuals running into a lot of trouble because they make changes and they don't actually quantify the impact they've made. So they make their life easier,
right?
But they make someone else's life harder as a result. And so
that's what I'm trying to say.
Right. So you can't just have people that are making changes constantly. But if it is an improvement that adds value and makes everyone's life easier and doesn't have a detrimental impact up or downstream, then let's do that and make it the new standard.
Right.
The end.
Amen.
Right.
That's the way it should be.
So we can't work on everything all at once. Right? So we've already no, you can't.
Oh.
I don't know if you know this. The number of people
I didn't realize that.
The number of people in your organization is finite. You can bring in additional resources, but you can't do everything all at once. Much as some companies
you can bring additional resources, but that it's not free. So
that too.
And I actually liked your comment about you should run it like a product. There should be a backlog that people work through. You have a unit of people that work through it.
Correct.
But again, it's a finite amount of people with finite dollars. And I don't think, I think it's actually cheaper to say, we're going to have a team of whatever, and that team's going to have a budget of whatever, and whatever they get through when they pull the backlog for the year is what gets done. Not, here's my wish list, let's try and resource against the wish list.
Yeah.
That's impossible.
Right.
Because you're not going to afford that. Never. You will never afford, unless you're a company that has no budgets.
Right, which I mean is not really reasonable or practical.
Reasonable,
right?
No.
So yeah, I mean that's one way of doing it, and then you can say, well, this year we're going to focus on, core processes, because those are the ones that most impact our customers. Those are the ones that have the most volume of transactions. Those are the ones that are going to give us the biggest bang for our buck. So you could do that. You could also look at the strategic impact. So you may have some support project processes that might provide strategic value. Right? You may have some processes that, so you can also sort of build that backlog on things that are strategic. You can look at the process health. Is it relatively stable? Doesn't mean it's good or bad, but it's stable, which means it's consistent, which means there's no variation. From a health perspective, it's probably pretty good. So you can look at it that way. I can look at things and prioritize my backlog based on feasibility, like what's reasonable to work on, knowing what other projects are happening, what's coming a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. So all of these are different ways that you can decide and prioritize, what work gets done. Because again, you can't do everything.
Can't do it all.
It's just impossible.
Right.
And another way that you can do that is to look at some of the common measures that are used in process management. So the most common, the one that most people are probably familiar with, is like time. How long it takes to do X. How long it takes to get from the point of the beginning of the transaction to the end. But there's also measures like cost. How much does it cost to run this process? What is the level of quality? And quality is a measure of variation. So the more variation you have, the lower quality. You did my Six Sigma course. I remember.
So I'm going to throw something else into that, Vince.
Sure.
And you've heard me say this 100 times.
If not more, and I don't even know what's coming, but yeah.
But you know it as soon as I start saying it.
Okay.
A customer's highest effort is our biggest inefficiency. So that is another unit of measure. Customer effort. Your customer's telling you that the effort to do this transaction, which is related to a process, is time consuming. The effort is high. I bet you there's a ton of variation. the process isn't tight, there's something going on with that process. If a customer is complaining about it, which is another unit of measure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the ones that I brought up are sort of business internal focus, right? But you can also you can then quantify, what is that bad experience? What does that mean from a time perspective? What does it mean from a cost perspective? So, I mean, I can still bring it back and make it meaningful to the business. But yeah, if your customers are telling you where their pains are, I mean, why wouldn't you try to do something about it and solve it for them? So, figure out what, and this you've heard me say thousands of times. Figure out where what process is enabling that pain and fix it. Right. You got to overlay those two things, right? But your customer is going through a process that you created. It was funny. We did our talk recently, and we got a question, which was, and I loved it. And I don't know if we've talked about it on this show, but it was, well, what if your customer is not familiar with your process? And my response was, that's awesome. It's not their job to. It's not up to them.
Their job.
It's not up to them to know what your process is. It's up to you to make their life easy. Period. Full stop. Drop the mic.
It's not their job to know your silos,
right?
Your organizational structure, or your process. That's not their job. They have a job to do. That ain't one of them.
Right. So it's up to you to make their life
100%.
I mean, that's sort of it feels high level,
scratching the surface.
But it was, I mean, that was pretty tactical. I think
it was tactical.
Yeah.
But I still there's a lot in there to dig at.
Oh, dude, and we're not going to get into the modeling languages of BPMN versus UML. Like, I'm not going to do that.
I don't want to get into that. That could be trouble.
No, the BPMN people
is this an East Coast West Coast thing? I'm not even going to get into it.
It kind of is. I mean, so
I don't want to...
BPMN business process modeling notation versus UML, the universal modeling language. At the end of the day, this is my perspective. It doesn't matter. If I am building out in BPMN and the people that I'm sharing my maps with don't understand it, then who cares? Like, so it doesn't matter what language. It doesn't matter that you are not using the appropriate symbols. Now, I mean, if you're trying to turn that over to a developer or to a business architect or something, yes, you should use the right symbols. But it doesn't. It needs to be meaningful for the audience. So it does. I'm not going to get into that East Coast West Coast.
For the record, I'm not taking sides. I'm staying out of it.
I mean, neither am I. I sort of. I probably use BPMN more, but just because you can communicate, there's a lot more symbols, so you can communicate a lot more.
Right.
But it's also more complex. So, and then how to build a swim lane. Like, I'm not gonna. I use Visio, but like, I just use whiteboard or paper when I'm first starting out. So it's, again, not about tools. It's not about software. It's not about the language. It doesn't matter. It's got to be meaningful to the people that you're trying to communicate with. At the end of the day, that's what matters.
Yes.
And then the last thing, and we sort of alluded to this, was what is the nature of the work? Are you going through the process of continuous improvement, in which case you want to use Lean Six Sigma, you want to use process analysis, depending on which lens you view this through. So it's either through the Six Sigma lens or through the business analysis lens. Are you redesigning, which again can go through those two lenses? So it's just a deeper level of process analysis. And then in the Six Sigma world, there is there's just more advanced techniques that it would use for redesigning, like actually tearing down and rebuilding. And then, are you building something new? And for this, I I'm not. I don't want to pick sides either, but I sort of default to the design for Six Sigma, which is building in a perfect process to start. So you go through the steps and you figure it out. So it's a different methodology to DMAIC, which is used in Six Sigma, but it's still very, very. You build a brand new, high quality, minimal variation process right out the gate.
That actually dovetails nicely with service design, because you build the service and then other variations to the service are just that, variations.
Sure.
They're like the service exceptions. So
sure.
Yes, I'm pretty much in line with that way of building things.
Tremendous. And then the last thing, Mike, because you can do all this stuff. I can tell you're getting bored. You can do all this stuff. I'm just calling you out. I could see the glaze. Like, okay, it's this guy's, because I think this is the second time I've said. Oh, and one more thing. You can do all this stuff, but failure to monitor is really is a bad thing. So you want to, monitor your process. We talked about earlier, grooming your backlog and, reviewing things and not letting people make changes, but you want to proactively observe your process, ensure that it's behaving the way that you want it to. A really, really good approach to this is to use statistical process control, which is another thing from Six Sigma, but it's also its own standalone.
Well, we have a friend. We have a friend who always says, probably on the daily, you need to inspect what you expect. And so, yes, it is very important that you monitor, as Vince said.
Yeah.
Or else, because you're not. How do you know if you're meeting the expectation that you first built into that process?
It's that, and it also prevents you from overreacting when something bad does happen.
Right.
Which is equally important.
Which happens a lot.
Yes. Oh my God, the sky is falling. No, this was just a random event. It happened. Right. We can investigate and figure out what happened, but it's like, let's not change the process because this one thing happened one time.
Let's not, we don't need to add more fat to the process because this one thing happened.
Yes.
And I think we've also heard, you've talked about events, like what is the measure of variation you want to have in that process? Like is it within that level? Is it outside? But but when you inspect it, was it because a whole bunch of factors? But the move isn't we need to solve for this one thing that went wrong. So now we need to make this process bulkier, add more things to it. Because, and this could be a whole other episode. When you try and automate all that, you want to add all the fancy stuff like the RPA and it won't work. Mm-hmm. The fatter you make a process, the more intricate you make it. So again, you need to monitor that and then monitor those exceptions.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the statistical process control is really useful where it establishes your tolerance levels plus or minus 3 standard deviations.
Right.
So if something happens outside of the plus or minus 3 standard deviations, it's like saying what just happened has less than a 1% probability of happening through normal occurrence. Right. Something is wrong. Right. And so, you would expect that 99% of the time you're within those confidence intervals, those confidence levels, or tolerance levels rather. So, it's an alert. Like something is wrong. Don't do anything necessarily, but it's a flag to investigate. So
correct.
So do some investigation and then make changes if they're required. But don't overreact if you don't need to.
Overreacting is always bad.
Oh,
in any realm of life or situation.
Yeah.
Overreacting is bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I watched, just to really close this on, I watched not a great movie recently, the Hitman's Bodyguard with Samuel L. Jackson and Ryan Reynolds and Salma Hayek. And there was a line that I kind of liked, which is boring is best. Like, it doesn't need to be flashy, doesn't need to be, but it's like boring is fine. Simple is fine. Simple is fine. With that was a 35-minute deep dive, not so deep dive into business process.
Yes.
But that was the tactical, high level tactical version of business process. Anything you want to add, Mikey?
I think we've said it. I think we've said it all in the high level tactical version of the podcast.
Yes. If you want to know more and you want to get more detail, I this is not meant to be self-promotional, but I do have like a course on this where several hours, it's intense, but totally worth it. And you can check that out. You can just visit vincentmirabelli.com for that, or you can to hear what Mike's up to. You can go to michaelmartino.ca.
I told everyone to get their pens ready. I warned you 35 minutes ago.
Yeah, hopefully you did.
Hopefully.
And if you didn't, this is the beauty of the podcast. Just rewind it. Just restart it.
Yeah.
For Mike, I am Vince. This has been the Business Not As Usual podcast. We will catch you in the next one.
See ya.